Hello everyone, welcome to another part of ASEAN Pacific episode. The topic of our discussion today is the BrahMos sells to the Philippines, its strategic aspects and geopolitical implications to the region. These shows will be exactly my second shows about the sale of BrahMos to the Philippines. In the previous programs, we discussed these topics with my Indian colleagues. In these shows, now we are going to try to understand the Salas of BrahMos, their regional implication and strategic aspects from the perspective of Philippines. My guests for today are Dr. Chesebe Cabalza and Don McLain Gill. Let me introduce my guest to you. Dr. Chesebe Cabalza is founding president of the Manila-based think tank, International Development Security Cooperation, IDCSC. He teaches in graduate school at the University of Philippines, Diliman. He is also considered the father of security anthropology in Southeast Asia. He is the co-author of the book, The Rise of Philippinization. Philippinization is not Finlandization. Don McLain Gill is a resident fellow at the International Development and Security Cooperation, IDCSC, and the director of the South Asia and Southeast Asia at the Philippine Middle East Studies Association, PMECA. He is also a geopolitical analyst and author of who has written over the 18 publications on India and Southeast Asian security relations and Indian foreign policy. He is also the co-author of the book, The Rise of Philippinization. Philippinization is not Finlandization. Welcome, Dr. Chester, and welcome, Don. Thank you for joining me today.
Thank you.
It's our pleasure for inviting us.
Don, let me start with you, given the importance of our topics today. What does the BrahMos sale mean for India's defense industry and its Act East policy? Can you give us an overview, please?
Thank you so much for that question, Lokman. And again, I wish to thank you for the kind invitation. It is truly a pleasure to be part of this fantastic program on such an important issue. Now, India is a top importer of defense equipment. However, recently it has sought to shift its policy towards an importer to an exporter of defense equipment. Now, if we look into the statistics from 2016 and compare it to how it was in 2021, or between 2020 to 2021, we could see that there is a significant increase of the defense exports from India to several of its partners in the Indo-Pacific. Now, there is, of course, an ambitious target to reach a point of $5 billion in terms of defense equipment exports by the year 2025. And this, I believe, is an incredible feat for India, considering that it has the capabilities to develop and enhance military technology and equipment for several countries throughout the region and beyond. In order to build their capacities. And of course, this also serves as an important factor for India as it projects itself as a major security provider in the Indo-Pacific. Now, of course, this sale of the BrahMos cruise missiles is absolutely important, particularly because it complements the Act East policy, which was established by Prime Minister Narendra Modi, which actually is the upgraded version, so to speak, of the Look East policy of the 1990s. Now, this policy significantly incorporates the neighbors of India to its east, particularly East and Southeast Asia, Australia, all throughout the Pacific. And this particular deal further solidifies its partnership and, of course, its involvement into the strategic calculus of key Southeast Asian countries such as the Philippines.
Dr. Chesa, let me turn to you. How will the BrahMos acquisition complement the Philippine military modernization program?
It was a dream way back in 2015 because of the mischief experience with China, and definitely the armed forces trying to strengthen and modernize its armed forces wanted to solidify its presence in the South China Sea. And one of the proposals there is to buy a missile, basically because of the impending threat coming from China. And relative to that, there were suggestions coming from the armed forces that maybe they would want to buy these BrahMos coming from India with the collaboration with Russia. And technically, because at the time we had the traditional ally with the United States, and we also thought that maybe the US will help us with that. But nonetheless, because of the sudden political shift in the political landscape of the Philippines, when President Duterte became was in power, he tried to diversify our defense relationship, and one of which is to look at some of the possibilities where the AFP can invest and attract some other partners. And with that, they were able to diversify our defense relations with non-traditional powers like Russia and India. And the study done by the AFP on the BrahMos was placed into a realization after a thorough review coming from the armed forces itself that maybe if they could buy BrahMos, which they thought that it would be affordable for the Philippines since we have limited budget also for the armed forces. Because in our constitution, we put more premium to education rather than the armed forces. And with all these studies coming from the armed forces and some of the reports coming from the security think tanks, the government was convinced that maybe this is the right time to buy that BrahMos. And I think it came at the right time because of the revitalized program on the modernization program of the armed forces. And of course, we are now in the second phase of this um, modernization program. And there was a paradigm shift also in the armed forces because basically it's very military centric. And one of the strategies at the time is to shift from land-based strategy to territorial defense. And by doing that, you have to strengthen the Navy and the Air Force. So right in time, you have BrahMos there because it's a land-shore anti-missile system there. And technically, there was a time also that President Duterte visited Russia and then India, and this deal became relevant basically. And I think only today the AFP and its counterpart from India signed the agreement which cemented the legitimacy and presence of this very important relationship. And I would want to subscribe to the thoughts of Don on the implications of this agreement, not only for the Philippines but for India, but basically for the region. Because all the time we've been thinking about our traditional ally, the United States, and of course with the antagonism coming from the giant neighbor China, and all of a sudden we've seen other partners like India. So I think you see the pronounced importance of this agreement basically between India and the Philippines, particularly for the modernization program of the Philippines.
Don, in this aspect, can you provide the current situation, the relations of India and Philippines? What is your take on this bilateral relations of these two countries?
Right, thank you. And before looking into the current situation when it comes to the Philippine-India partnership, I think it's important to actually look, at the past, particularly during the Cold War period and much into the post-Cold War period. The status of Philippine-Indian relations could be considered as satisfactory. There was a significant limitation, despite the huge potential that could be tapped between both like-minded partners. Now, during the Cold War, it was mostly due to structural inhibitions, while into the post-Cold War, we could see that there was a lack of awareness about each other's potential as partners who can significantly expand the scope of their collaboration throughout Asia, throughout the continent. Now, since 2014, there was a significant increase in the engagement between India and the Philippines. In fact, this also coincided again with the Act East policy of Prime Minister Modi. Now, as we can see, the Philippines rather, India has greatly supported the Philippines, particularly in relation to its sovereign rights. It has also also upheld the arbitral victory of the Philippines vis-a-vis China in the South China Sea, and in fact, India has significantly played its role as a capacity builder for the Philippines, particularly not only in a traditional military sense, but also in terms of counterterrorism. Now, in 2017, Prime Minister Modi, paid his visit to the Philippines, and this was the first time an Indian Prime Minister visited a country in more than 30 years. And on top of that, in 2019, President Ramnath Kovind arrived in the Philippines, where he signed a number of noteworthy agreements with his counterpart, President Duterte. Now, the BrahMos missile deal in particular demonstrates, as in line with what Dr. Chester has mentioned, that India is now presenting itself as a significant alternative amid the tumultuous power competition between the United States and China in Southeast Asia. Now, of course, the BrahMos missile is an absolutely fantastic piece of equipment, considering that if you look into the nitty gritty details, with a top speed of Mach 2.8, it has the ability to target at least advanced aircraft such as the Chinese J-20, and it's extremely arduous to intercept, particularly with a broad range of air defense systems. However, the last point that I'd want to make is that pragmatism should still reign in terms of the evaluation of this aspect in Philippine security policy, which Dr. Chester would touch on later on. Uh, we have to also be aware that the number of missiles acquired in relation to the fast modernization, technological modernization of China in terms of its military equipment. We cannot overstate, of course, the role of the BrahMos here. However, we have to understand that this is a significant step for India to get its foot on the door in tapping into the defense market of the Philippines, and they could more closely work together comprehensively to boost the capacity of the Philippines, and of course to enhance the partnership that they have.
Dr. Chester, how
Mm.
will the acquisition of the BrahMos missile configure the bilateral relationship between the Philippines and China? Because
Mm.
when we look at the media outlet, the BrahMos missiles, like directly, the Philippine accusation of the BrahMos is direct to the China. What
Yeah.
will be your take on this subject?
That's an interesting question, Lokman. Well, definitely China is watching us, and even before the Philippines bought the BrahMos Inc. its agreement with India, basically they know that the Philippines is at the long run of doing its own um, modernization program. Actually, China and the Philippines started at the same footing in terms of their modernization program, but it seems like in the Philippine context, we have to ask the Congress to approve it, and then of course there are a lot of interventions coming from different stakeholders. Unlike in the People's Liberation Army, Navy, definitely they have their own funding for that, and that makes it more fast-paced when it comes to their modernization program. The point that I'm trying to drive at here is that um, while the Philippines has a three phases of its modernization program, definitely the BrahMos was already in the list, and definitely before having this agreement with India, it took a process also coming from different stakeholders. Now, China is the white elephant here in the room, but basically, while China knew that the Philippines inked an agreement with India, there would be a repercussion also regionally speaking, because definitely in terms of the regional context, we know for a fact that India and China has also their own skirmishes when it comes to their land tensions in terms of their relationship, defense and security relationship there. But of course, beyond that, we also see the importance of India, particularly the one has spoken about, particularly in the Indo-Pacific region, where India will play a major role there. But the Philippines, definitely, because we have a first-hand experience on how China tried to intrude in our maritime spaces and definitely try to aggravate us. I think the BrahMos will give us another stance on how to protect our sovereignty. But this is not about the deterrence on how we will protect our sovereignty. I think it will just boost the confidence of the Philippines in terms of the confidence building mechanism, because basically we know for a fact that China is bigger, and larger, and more armed than the Philippines. But the point here is that we have a new instrument to protect our sovereignty. And more than that, we are supported by the international community. And that's the reason why the BrahMos sale is getting a lot of buzz, not only in the Philippines, but in the region, basically, particularly in the defense and security sector, because there is a new actor in town. India is here. Help us, basically. I think that's the message that the world is trying to send to the Philippines. That imagine Vietnam also has some maritime skirmishes with China, but how come that it was the Philippines who was able to get the first deal from India, basically? So I think that is the message here, and China, for fact, knows about that, the importance of our deal with India, because India is a maritime power. It's also a naval power. So I think that is a strong message that we want to send to everyone here.
Uh, Don, let me turn you. How do the sales of the BrahMos impact to the regional security architecture in line with India's relations with China and the US?
Thank you for that, Lokman. And that is indeed a very important question. Now, one point that I'd like to make, particularly vis-a-vis China, is that we must understand and we must look at India's engagements to its east in the Pacific, particularly beyond a narrowly defined notion of merely an attempt to counter China. India is a rising great power with formidable material capabilities, and it is inevitable for any rising major power or great power to enhance its partnerships with its extended neighborhood to its east, particularly in this context. Now, there are a lot of motivations for India's engagements uh, in Southeast Asia. However, this does not mean that its power competition with China is not important. In fact, it serves as a major cornerstone in its strategic policy. However, we must look at it in a multifaceted manner. In fact, that we must look into the other motivations that have catalyzed India's enhanced engagements with Southeast Asia. Now, as far as 2017, and as early as 2017, when India was making negotiations with Vietnam regarding the Akash missiles, China, there was a significantly strong and negative remark from China from that particular point. In fact, it has espoused this in the Global Times. And it's interesting to look at it, because if we look into the statistics that we are, in the last few years, we can see that China has in fact enhanced its strategic footprint in the Indian Ocean, in South Asia. It has been deeply involved in the development projects of strategically located ports surrounding India, which has then sort of brought out this theory called the string of pearls. And on top of that, in line with this particular context, China is also a major arms supplier to many of India's immediate neighbors, and it has also continued to build infrastructure in borders such as Bhutan, in the border with Bhutan, which also directly impacts India's security calculus. Now, if we look into this, India does not have any vested territorial interests in Southeast Asia. In fact, it is a significant pillar in maintaining the stability of the rules-based order in the Indo-Pacific. and it does not seek to engage based on narrowly defined objectives, but really work on capacity building in order to provide these countries with an alternative, as India has a huge market that would greatly benefit these countries as well. And again, goes to the point of being a major security provider as it seeks to take up a bigger and more responsible role in the Indo-Pacific. Now, this I believe would be very important equations to factor in, uh, including as far as understanding what India's motivations are in Southeast Asia, and of course. The United States and China, as they are deeply involved into this what we call the power competition. Again, India's role here would be defined, and this would also be an opportunity for India to enhance its collaborations with other Indo-Pacific powers such as Japan, Australia, and France, to really work together to provide a much needed platform for development for other countries in Southeast Asia. And this, I believe, is an important point to note, away from the narrowly defined objective of looking at it mainly as a way to counter China.
Dr. Chester, how will the BrahMos impact the future security policy orientation of the Philippines?
Well, definitely, there are hopes that the Philippines will diversify its defense and security relations. The mere fact that this agreement basically gave us an important lesson that it's not only our traditional ally who could support us, who could sell arms with us, but there are rising powers like India, Russia, and even China for that matter, who are willing to support and help us. But of course, um, we know the power competition is getting tighter and tougher lately because of this hegemonic rivalry between China and the United States here. But the Philippines, because of these sales of BrahMos to the Philippines, it gives us more importance, and it highlights the strategic importance of the Philippines because basically we are an actor in this current South China Sea conundrum right now, and we are at the heart of this Indo-Pacific region. And the Philippines has become a middle power lately, meaning to say that we can attract powers and we can buy military hardware now, which we cannot do before because of the economic performance of the Philippines lately. And I think because of the affirmative and clever defense and foreign policy that the government is trying to embrace right now. So those are some of the changes that we are seeing in the Philippines, given the like-minded relations that we have with other countries. I think this will pave a way for a much bigger and more diversified relations with the world, basically. I think that is the lesson that the Philippines can get from this purchase of BrahMos from India.
Dr. Chester and Don, lastly, I would like to make a small comment. Maybe you have another comment on this, my comment. Now, given the importance of the BrahMos, the power of BrahMos and the speed of BrahMos,
Hmm.
and also the Russia, I think the one part of the BrahMos producing. Through this agreement, is it possible to say that the Russia also involved to the region? And another thing, I think that currently under the agreement between the Philippines and India, only the Philippine position is the land-based. In the future, is it possible to acquire the air and the naval part of the BrahMos? What will be your comment on this question or the comment? If you have
Should I?
comment.
Would you want
Go
to
go
go
on,
first,
go
Dr.
on,
Chester?
go
Okay,
on,
all
Don,
right.
and then I'll follow
Uh,
up.
I'll give a brief comment regarding this. And we have to understand that India and Russia are historic, pragmatic, time tested partners that have sought to expand their cooperation not only in one part of the world, but also to expand it in Southeast Asia as well. And this was reflected in the discussions and negotiations during President Putin's visit to India last year in December, and this is an opportunity also for Russia to incorporate itself into the Indo-Pacific construct. Well, not explicitly, but because of India's projection of and its adherence to having an inclusive Indo-Pacific region, India can serve as an important bridge for Russia to engage with other countries in this particular geographic space. And Russia has the capabilities, of course. In fact, its sales are significant in Southeast Asia. A majority of the countries in Southeast Asia rely heavily on Russian defense equipment. And India, having a significant know-how on the functions and, of course, the maintenance and use of these Russian equipment, would be an important partner, a security partner in this particular field. And of course, you have to understand that the BrahMos is a collaborative effort between India and Russia, and this itself would also enhance the image of Russia as a partner of India in this particular region.
Dr. Chester, do you have any comment?
Yeah, definitely. One of the critiques about the missile is that it has a range of 300-kilometer range only. I think that is very limited when it comes to comparing it to other ranges, to other missiles. But of course, the reason why the Philippines bought this agreement is for its strategic importance, not on the matters of kilometers, ranges, and so on. But the point here, it is an evolving agreement where once the Philippines will have more secured sovereignty using these kind of instruments, maybe we can upgrade it because we are still in the second stage of our modernization program. Maybe by the third phase, we could and maybe after 2028, once we complete all this modernization program, and once the Philippines becomes stronger and prosperous, then maybe we can buy bigger and better missiles for that. But the point I'm trying to drive at here is that this is symbolic for the Philippines. At least we can buy now missiles and some other military material for our country for the sake of us protecting our sovereignty. And it matters to us Filipinos because it boosts our confidence that at least our armed forces and the government are doing something for us. They are doing their best to protect us. So that is the strong message that we can get from this.
Dr. Chess and Don also for you, the agreement of BrahMos just come the following the AUKUS agreement. Is it possible to say is it possible to consider the agreement of BrahMos as part of the regional arms race? What will be your take?
Well, of course, the BrahMos came in first, but the submarine program of the Philippines is still on the list. We've been dreaming to have that. Imagine that in ASEAN, this is the next normal for most of Southeast Asian countries. Even Myanmar has its submarine already, so it's a landlocked country. But for the Philippines, which is an archipelagic nation trying to become a maritime power, this is a dream for the Philippines. But of course, now you have the shore-based anti-missile system through BrahMos ready. I think the next step is to buy and provide for submarine program for the Philippines. And I think maybe that would be part of the third phase of the modernization program. And basically, this is part of the program that would help us in our modernization program to protect the sovereignty and territorial integrity of the Philippines.
Don,
If I
you
could
have
just make a brief comment, yeah, I mean, Dr. Chester has explicitly outlined the significance of this, and I just want to redirect the attention to the fact that the Philippines is now significantly focused on enhancing its naval maritime capabilities away from the traditional perspective. And this is very important considering that, as we can see, a significant array of traditional and non-traditional security issues happen at sea. And this is an absolute important shift when it comes to the security and military policies of the country, of the Philippines. And With this, we would be able to enhance collaborations in the maritime level as well. And this would be definitely important for the Philippines to safeguard its sovereign rights, its sovereignty, and of course its interests as a member of the international system.
Thank you very much, Don. Thank you very much, Dr. Chester, for your great contribution to my shows tonight.
Thank you. It's an
Thank you
honor
so
for
much.
us.
It's a true pleasure to be here. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you also for our audiences who have been with us until now. And please don't forget for our upcoming shows, subscribe to my channel too. See you in the
Thank you
next
so much.
shows.
Thank you.